1805 had been an unsuccessful year for Napoleon. Even with his decisive victory at Frankenmark, the Austrians refused to make peace. The shattered remains of Mack's army retreated east. The French mounted a pursuit, but within a few days the harsh winter weather kicked in, forcing Napoleon to halt the pursuit. Only minor movements occur through December and early January. Meanwhile, in Italy, Archduke Charles, in charge of the main Austrian army, had received new orders to leave behind a portion of his army to contain Messina and march with his main force to reinforce Vienna. In response, Messina made a bold move. Rather than attack this smaller Austrian force, he gambled that he could move south and knock Naples out of the war. This plan worked. The Austrian force made no attempt to pursue him, and on February the 12th, he defeated a smaller force at Gaeta. Within a few days, Naples sued for peace. Back in Germany, Napoleon receives word of Charles's movement. Now aware that the Austrians have no intentions of peace, and worried about being caught between two fresh armies, the French Emperor starts devising a new plan. But more bad news reaches Napoleon. Just days after Naples sued for peace, Prussia declares war, joining the Third Coalition, and bringing over 100,000 troops into the fray. With his army rested and reinforced, Napoleon begins sending out a flurry of orders. Bernadotte moves north, crossing the Danube at Passau. Augereau's 7th Corps moves towards Linz, attempting to bait the Russians into an attack. They initially take the bait as Bagration's advance guard moves to intercept, but with multiple reports of French movement south of the Enns River, Kutuzov orders the Russian army to withdraw across the Danube to safety. This order comes just in time as the French attempt to encircle the Russians against the river. A few minor battles erupt as the last of the Russians cross the Danube. Kutuzov's army now moves east towards Vienna until they are joined by the 5th Column and the Imperial Guard, as well as Emperor Alexander of Russia and Emperor Francis of Austria in person. Meanwhile, Napoleon sends Ney to move down the south side of the Danube as a feint, hoping the Allies will believe it's the bulk of the French army. Kutuzov wants to retreat towards Vienna and join the 6th and 7th columns, marching through Poland, and maybe even give time for the rest of Charles's army to arrive. But with reports from Bagration's advance guard that a single French corps is isolated east of Gratzen, and with the Prussians on the move, the two emperors decide to go on the offensive. On the 22nd of March, Mortier's 8th Corps received scouting reports that the main Russian army was heading towards him. He sent word to Napoleon and began setting up a defensive position to delay them. The French marshal has around 14,000 infantry in his command, which he positions in Gratzen and a neighbouring town, with around 4,000 men in reserve across the stream. 2,000 light cavalry are also placed on the flanks. The Russian army will arrive throughout the first and second day, mostly from the east, but the French are unaware of two Prussian divisions under General Kalkreuth marching from Prague, likely to arrive on the second day from the north. The French, on the other hand, will mostly enter play from the western and southern sides of the battlefield. Just after midday, Legron's column of 12,000 men arrive. Around the same time, Soult's corps begins moving to reinforce Mortier's position. At around 1:30, Davout's corps becomes visible in the west. At around 2 p.m, Kutuzov arrives on the field alongside Gortchakov's 5th column. The sounds of muskets can be heard as some minor skirmishes break out between Legron's and Mortier's men. Further north, Bagration's advance guard begins to move up on Mortier's left flank. Kutuzov, knowing that time is not on his side, orders Legrand to assault the initial French positions. This assault scores early success, as Russian musketeers force French infantry out of Gratzen. Russian grenadiers charge across the stream and make a push for the other town, but are halted by cannon fire from the high ground. Napoleon arrives around 3 o'clock. He immediately orders Davout to swing north and push back Bagration's flanking attack. Meanwhile, the combat around Gratzen continues as the French attempt a counterattack. Kutuzov also receives another 10,000 men from the 3rd column arriving from the south. His force is immediately thrown into the action as the Russians assault the town from 2 sides. Two Austrian columns under Bellegarde and Collerot arrive. The latter sets up as a reserve alongside Gortchakov, while Bellegarde begins moving to pressure the French in the south. Bagration aggressively pressures the French river crossing, placing 20 guns to fire on the French flank. At 4 o'clock, the Russian Imperial Guard under Constantine and Miradoranch's 4th column arrive. Kutuzov is now joined by the 2 allied emperors in person. In the north, Davout launches 2 of his divisions at Bagration's smaller force, supported by 2,000 dragoons. I think this would be a good moment to talk about the rules I'm using today. Napoleonic Kriegführung. From what I can tell, it's just Napoleonic warfare in German. The rules are designed for an army level actions, but can be scaled up or down without modification, designed by Peter Frederick Model. I'll put a link in the comments for anyone who's interested in the rules. One of my priorities for these rule sets at this scale is commander ratings and effect. I want to see a difference between a great commander like Napoleon over, a lesser one like Mack, for example. In these rules, each general or corps commander, in this case, and army commanders, have 2 ratings, as you can see from this image, which gives my ratings for each general present at this battle. The first value is their quality, which is used to move units, initiate close assaults, and also determine how many actions their units can take in a turn. The reason I bring this up is because Davout, as you can see, is rated as a 5, which allows him to make 3 actions for his units if he passes a quality check, which is just a single d6 aiming for quality of 5 or under. In this case, he passes the check and uses 2 of his actions, so the units can move twice, and then a 3rd action to begin firing on Bagration's men. The second value for each general is their inspirational impact. How well can they inspire their troops? When a unit will be destroyed, roll a d6, and on that value or better, the unit remains on the field, but a fail can lead to the commander being killed. Back to the action, with Bellegarde's Austrian column beginning its assault on Soult's men guarding the French flank. Meanwhile, Kutuzov plugs his newly arrived troops into the mix, but they meet determined French resistance positioned on the high ground. Although the Austrian and Russian forces make some gains, fresh brigades from Soult's 4th Corps counterattack and force them back over the stream. With darkness starting to cover the battlefield, both sides rest in the open, hoping for the rest of their reinforcements for the 2nd day of the battle. Napoleon deploys the remaining French troops from Soult's 4th Corps and Mortier's 8th Corps in the centre, atop the high ground. Bernadotte's 1st Corps, Murat's Cavalry Reserve and the Imperial Guard all arrive in the evening hours. The Guard and the Cavalry are placed in reserve. Meanwhile, Bernadotte's 1st Corps is placed on the right of the French position, ready for a morning attack on Bellegarde's column. The last, but certainly not least, Davout's 3rd Corps positions on the French left, with orders to attack and sweep Bagration's advance guard from the field. The Austro-Russian army, currently at 91,000 men, is deployed as seen, with the bulk of their force positioned around the main French position in the centre. The Allied plan involves an all-out attack on the French centre with 4 converging attacks. The Grande Armée consists of 79,000 men, Napoleon's plan is to use Davout and Bernadotte to apply pressure on the flank of the Allied advance, and then one final assault on the main Russian position in the centre to break the Allied army. The French opened the fighting at around 5 AM, with Bernadotte's First Corps crossing the stream using skirmishers to screen their advance. Around the same time in the north, Davout wasted no time launching Friant's division into the fray, supported by around 2,000 dragoons on their flank. Just before 6 AM the Russian attacks begin. They gain initial success, pushing the French back, but Soult plugs Legrand's fresh division to contain the breakthrough. Bernadotte's attack in the south proves disastrous, as Austrian volleys and a cavalry charge prove too much. The remains of his corps retreat to safety behind the stream. Although the attack was unsuccessful, it does reduce pressure from the main assault, as Bellegarde's column was set to join the attack. The Russian infantry make repeated assaults on the French position, taking heavy losses in the process. Bagration's men fight off the French infantry in the town, but in response, Davout brings forward another 6,000 fresh infantry for a second attempt. Meanwhile, his dragoons run down a brigade of Austrian hussars and capture 18 guns. This cavalry breakthrough and Davout's fresh troops prove too much for the Russians, as Bagration's advance guard is swept from the field. Seeing this development in the north, Soult orders Vandamme to sweep down the hill, crashing into the Austrians now caught between them and the stream. This proves fatal for the Austrians, who flee back through Gratzen with heavy losses. With the French centre beginning to crumble, Napoleon plugs part of Murat's cavalry reserve into the line and moves up his cuirassier to assist. In the background, you can also see the arrival of the remaining 10,000 men from Bernadotte's First Corps. With Bagration's force routed and Collerot on the retreat, Davout reforms his men and sets up a grand battery of 70 guns to bombard Gratzen. Back in the south, Miloradovich begins his fourth attack of the morning. To his left, Bellegarde faces a fresh attack from Bernadotte's corps, now reinforced by 10,000 men and 2,000 Guard cavalry, led by Marshal Bessières. Around noon, more good news for the French, as Ney's hard-marching 6th Corps reached the field. French reports are confirmed, as a Prussian column is sighted in the north. Napoleon attempts to keep this information from his troops, and rides over to Ney to personally order him to delay the Prussian advance at any cost. At around 1 o'clock, the French assault begins. Murat leads forward 4,000 cuirassiers to support the First Corps, while over 40 guns fire from the high ground. This combined assault proves too much for the Austrians, as Bellegarde's flank is sent fleeing from the field. Meanwhile, Soult orders Saint-Hilaire's division to attack in an attempt to pin this Russian force to assist Bernadotte's assault to his right. In response to this development, Kutuzov orders his Guard cavalry, supported by Dokhorov's newly arrived first column, to shore up this flank. Over in the north, Ney deploys his corps in a defensive position on the high ground. The Prussian advance is slow and takes almost an hour to form up. With most of the Russian reserve plugged, and word of a Saxon division in his rear, Napoleon decides it's time for the all-out assault. Davout and Mortier attack Gratzen from two sides with support from the rest of Murat's cavalry reserve. With the battle reaching its climax, Napoleon orders forward the Imperial Guard as a final gamble to break the Russian line. This order proves too late, as the Russian army has already begun its retreat. With Bernadotte's corps rolling up one flank and Davout up the other, the two emperors decide it's time to withdraw. In the north, the Prussian attack fails, as they march uphill into French guns. With reports of the Russian withdrawal, Kalkreuth orders his retreat. The Battle of Gratzen is over. Napoleon has managed another victory, but at a high price, losing 22,000 men, almost a fifth of his overall force. The Allies come off far worse, with around 35,000 men killed or wounded, most of which were lost in repeated attacks on the French centre. A crucial victory for the French Emperor, although unable to mount much of a pursuit due to the exhaustion of his army, it does force the Prussian army to pull back, giving the French much needed time. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or suggestions, just leave them in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.